What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now Back to the Past. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to go over 5 horror games you should play in this October, this Halloween season. Now, here's the deal. This is not necessarily a ranking, and this is only 5. There's actually several games that I almost specifically left off the list so that, maybe if this does well, or maybe in just a reoccurring thing every October, every Halloween, I could do 5 more games, because there are plenty of great horror games, and some of them I have played, some of them I haven't played. But I wanted to start with, I think, games that are pretty near and dear to my heart and do it for this video. Again, this is not in any particular order because there's just so many of these. Even though there's only 5, there's plenty more. But we will start, I will say, with potentially my favorite horror game of all time. If you've been watching the channel, you might know what I'm about to say. Until Dawn. Until Dawn is a phenomenal game. It probably is my favorite horror game of all time. Even it's not that scary. That's a thing too. I mean, I think this game combines a lot of aspects that I really like about gaming and just things in general, right? Like you got the Scream influence, which certainly doesn't hurt the game whatsoever. The impact it even had on me, I remember this game very fondly, playing with my friends and us actually sitting in our basement and doing almost like a voting kind of procedure for every time there was a major decision. We'd have the quickest poll you could possibly imagine to decide which option you were going to do. And I gotta say, the first time I played this game, I did pretty terrible. I'm actually really good, I think, at quick time events, and maybe I've gotten better as the years have gone on. You go back to, I believe, 2015 was Until Dawn. I lost a couple people my first playthrough, but this is a game that I played multiple times, which normally doesn't happen all that often with choice-based. Normally, I'm content with what I get. I look up the other endings and stuff, but I don't experience it for myself. I say, okay, well, one and done for the game. I'll watch the other endings online, and I do that actually for several, even like the Dark Picture games. A lot of them I've done that for, and I don't do it myself. Until Dawn, I did that, but then I did it myself. I said, okay, I gotta see it just on the screen in front of me. But I think great acting, great themes, again, a really cool combination of that Scream influence, but also supernatural, and the game basically being half and half. It's a teen slasher film kind of thing, and then it's a supernatural thing. And a lot of games I think would fall in one of those, would be pretty weak compared to the other. Maybe they would kind of get their stride in one of them. I actually think this game does it well all throughout. It also just shocked me of how good it was. Like, remember, this was supposed to be a move game, right? Like using the analog, and it was completely rebooted and restarted. And I remember seeing the new trailer, like when it kind of came back alive at E3, not like live at E3, but like at home. And I remember thinking, this game's got potential. And then it came out, and I remember the reviews being pretty good. It was kind of a more under the radar game. Sony, I believe, never pushed it as much as they probably should, because I think this is such a special game. I mean, this is probably one that I could talk about more than any others. And as I keep saying, the 10-year anniversary, 2 years away. I will be doing it. I mean, it's a long time. A lot of things can happen between now and then, but if we're all still here and around, I will absolutely be doing a 10 years later kind of video, because it is my favorite horror game of all time. So that's one you should absolutely play. Let's talk about another one that I think, that one's more subjective, right? That one's more like me. Amnesia, The Dark Descent. We actually made a video specifically talking about this. Is this the greatest horror game of all time? I think you can make that argument. You could probably make the argument actually for several of the games we're about to talk about. But no, Amnesia was so special. And I think, look, like when I think back, do I prefer Until Dawn to Amnesia? Yes, I do. And I've also played Until Dawn more than I've played Amnesia. But you think to the impact that it had on actually quite a few different things, and this is what we talked about in the video that I made on it. It's not just like the horror game genre. Now, plenty of things were taken from Amnesia going forward, and it really, I think, like revitalized the genre. And it's often looked at not just by gamers but also by the industry as, this is a heavily influential game. Not to mention it's just a really good game, but also like what it did on like the YouTube side of, like my hometown, right? Like it did some really special things with the PewDiePies of the world. And the funny thing that I've said before is, like, I actually never watched Amnesia. Like, I know PewDiePie did. I've seen some of the clips and stuff, but he was not the one that I actually watched. I watched somebody else play it, and that's what got me into it. I watched somebody play I think the first like half. It was also like the invisible, like the water creature as well. So it was that part as well. And I remember pitching this to my friends, the same friends who I played Until Dawn with. I pitched Amnesia years before. I said, hey, there's this horror game out. It looks super scary. You can't fight. You have to run, you have to hide. It literally can break down in terms of how like calm you are, right? And I remember pitching at night, like when we were going to sleep, I pitched them like the basic premise of this game, and we got it the next day and we played through it. So I think this is such a special game. It's a special game to me because I'll always remember those memories, but it's also a special game to the industry because I think it tells a really good story, and a lot of story through kind of interactions, like you're reading a lot, but it also does tell you things. The idea of amnesia, the idea of, like I said, running, hiding, like you can't fight these things. And they're kind of scary, but they're not all that scary. Like if you stare at the picture of the creature in Amnesia, it's not the most terrifying thing. It's just like Slender Man, right? Like if you actually look at it, it's not that scary, but some of the jump scares and some of the ways it can get you, and just the idea that you can't fight back. And it certainly wasn't like the first game to do maybe any specific one of these things, but as we talk about, right, putting it all together, it was really the first game at least to successfully do that. And the market made on horror going forward, how many people in industry still talk about this game to this day. I think again, non-subject, like if I don't say, well, Until Dawn, no, it is my favorite game. I think when you look at it from like an industry perspective of what game was the most influential while also being the most good and pushing things forward, I think Amnesia kind of has to be. You could maybe argue like Silent Hill 2. So maybe that, maybe Amnesia, maybe a tie. I look to Amnesia was more like my era. Silent Hill was before my era, and we'll talk about that maybe in a different video, but Amnesia is number 2. Okay, next up, I want to go through a very short one, but again, a very influential one, impactful one, PT. Now, when I'm recording this, my plan, I'm going to actually do a video on PT specifically, and it's going to be on Halloween day. Halloween falls on a Tuesday. I upload on Tuesdays and Fridays, so it works out really well. PT is going to be the end of my kind of Halloween month. Now, I'm going to be using experimental means to play this game because sadly, the whole, PS4 and taking it off the store and only if you had it download, like the highly specific way that you can play PT on your PlayStation, unless you do a lot of kind of technical work, I do not have. I deleted it back in the day, and that was such a freaking mistake, and I wish I didn't do it, but I'm going to be playing PT very, very shortly. This video, this part on PT is just from my memory. I've never been more scared. That's why, that's why this is on the list. PT is such a special game. Obviously, like the behind the scenes stuff with Kojima and Del Toro and Konami and all that stuff, like it's kind of legendary. It's kind of like a folk story just on its own there, and the tragedy of what happened, after release. But the game itself is extremely short, at least compared to Until Dawn, and Amnesia is not that long, but it's also not as short as PT is. PT is like under an hour if you know what you're doing, and PT is the most terrified I've ever been. So I remember distinctly playing this game in my room, and I just put the controller down because you turn. It's only a couple hallways. You can only turn a couple different ways, but just the amount of ways that the rooms would shift and things would appear there when they weren't there 2 seconds ago, and the annoyance of that, by the way, of how scary it was. This game has scared me like no other. So I do remember, and I tried to play it in the dark. I really was like, okay, I'll go for it. I'm a big baby when it comes to horror things in general. I play many more horror games than I do horror movies, but I remember saying nope, and I literally I think I was facing maybe the first hallway, and I just put the controller, and I just sat there for about 20 minutes and said, I need to almost pump myself up because, well, like I said, the general theme of this very short, almost not like a tech demo, but just very short demo of a game, playable teaser actually, was that things just change. You're doing something and everything's fine, then you'll hear the phone, or you'll hear the baby crying, or you'll see the woman, and it's every time, or the blood will just start dripping from the walls. It's so terrifying. And this one, like I mentioned Amnesia, if you stare at Amnesia or you stare at Slender Man or stuff like that, they're not all that scary. This one, I don't know. This one, if you stare at that girl, she is actually extremely creepy, and I think this game does jump scares and does, again, interactive things happening, just instantaneously, right? It does it better than some of the other, in fact, any of the other games that we've already talked about so far in this video. So you can't just kind of pump yourself up and say, well, just stare at it, because it's like, well, no, every time you turn that hallway, you're rolling the dice that like something's going to be standing there that pops up. And then there's been people that have kind of like broken the game and with the camera, that the lady is like, she's always behind you, or like at certain parts of the game she's behind you, but when you turn around she's not there. Like, the game it's clever. Like, it's also just very clever in terms of how it was made by Kojima. And then of course, again, the long lasting, what this did for the industry afterwards. Well, number one, I do think it impacted the industry, even if we didn't actually get Silent Hill, and just the idea of what Konami did to Hideo and all that jazz. It's an interesting story. We'll be going over it much more in depth in about like a week and a half from now, but wanted to throw PT into this video. Next up, I want to talk about Outlast. Now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk more about Outlast 1 than Outlast 2 because of the impact that the first game had. I got to be honest. Now, I've played both of them. I've played 2 more times than I've played 1. Oh man, this is going to be kind of controversial. I actually prefer Outlast 2. Here's the thing with Outlast 2. I think at its best, it's better than 1. But at its worst, it's not even remotely close. I think 1 is very consistent. I think 1 is very scary, very creepy, and again, this was maybe one of, if not the first games that I played with, battery life kind of camera where you have to kind of monitor that stuff. I remember playing this again, actually, same friends that play, or maybe at least just one of them, for the other Amnesia and Until Dawn. We played a lot of horror games together. Dead Space, Fear were other ones we played. But I remember playing this. I remember being afraid, and the idea of the asylum and all that stuff. I think the setting works well. The shocks or the scares work really well. The creatures, or whatever you want to call them, I think they're terrifying. The idea of monitoring things. The idea again of being able to, you have to hide and let things walk by you. And I mean, it's scary. It's very tense. It's very scary. Outlast 1, again, very impactful, and what it did afterwards was impactful. 2, at its best, which, by the way, when I say that, I mainly mean the school sections. I'll never forget, because with the same friends, like, we played Outlast 2 as well, the school kind of horror, like ghost story kind of stuff, I think worked extremely, extremely well. I thought it was extremely scary. I thought just everything about it was so, so good. The cults, when you're outside more and all that stuff, I think it had its moments. I actually kind of liked it, but I didn't love it. I don't think it was as good. So Outlast 2 was more of like, when it's good, I think it was I would say, oh man, did it give like PT a run for its money? For me, for like being the most scary, I think it did. Like, I remember playing this in the basement with a friend, and we got like really scared. Like, it was scary. Now, these are like years apart, so like my tolerance to fear was different, basically, I guess, for all of these. But I remember being like very scared with Outlast 2. So I think when it's working, when it's firing on all cylinders, I think it's extremely good. When it's not so much scary as, like, I remember being annoyed. You have to hide quite often with all the enemies, and it's a different tone. It's a different way of almost playing the game. So I don't think it works so well. But Outlast, just in general, like, Outlast Trials actually is a pretty special game too. It's not the greatest thing of all time. I honestly sometimes forget it even released in its early access, but I played that game. Actually, I think they gave me maybe a code when it came out. I actually quite liked that game. I think it works actually well multiplayer, like having everybody together. And you could say, well, is it still going to be scary? Yeah, actually, I think that game does a really good job of, even though it is a multiplayer game and that can sometimes bring down the tension, bring down the scare level, I think it actually works really, really well because the game is still scary. So Outlast as a franchise, I think, is a really special franchise, and one that, I gotta be honest, like, in terms of all of these games, Outlast is probably the game I think about the least, or like last of this group. But I think it's maybe better than some of these games, or subjectively or objectively. I think it's a really, really special franchise. However, I gotta end this video, and this one, again, we've made a video specifically on already. Costume Quest 2 is my 5th game. You knew I had to, right? You had to. Because, for the simple reason, I'll just say one thing. I mean, I might go into more detail than this, but it's as I said in the specific video for Costume Quest 2. Costume Quest 2 is the ultimate Halloween game. Not horror game, not maybe, I mean, I know the title of the video and stuff, like, okay, when you think about October, well, why is October horror month? Why do you play scary games? Why do you watch scary movies in October? It's because of Halloween. Okay, now you have to separate what's special. Is is Halloween special because of the horrors and the frights and all, the scary stuff? Is it that, and is that important to you? Now, I think the theme of horror and scary stuff that really defines October to a lot of people, including quite a bit to myself. On the other side of things, trick-or-treating, okay? Trick-or-treating, universally known, maybe not practiced, but universally known, trick-or-treating. How many games do you know where you go out, you literally dress up in costumes, it's a turn-based fighting style, there's a story of time travel and an evil dentist that tries to eliminate Halloween, eliminate candy. Again, you use the costumes, which are literally different, almost personas of you, and you literally go to, not throughout the entire game, but a theme of the game is literally trick-or-treating. How many games do you know personally that has those? And the answer is just this game. Technically, maybe Costume Quest 1, as I've said before. I think Costume Quest 2 is much, much, much better, and don't even, like, it picks up actually right after Costume Quest 1, so you might want to, like, know the story, but generally, you can skip the first game and it wouldn't matter at all. This game, in my opinion, is the ultimate Halloween, not because of the horrors and the frights, but because of what you do in the game. I think it encapsulates Halloween better than literally any other game because it quite literally is a Halloween game. So it has to be on the list. It has to, I believe, and this is a game that's so under the radar still, even though it's kind of known, but it's also kind of not. It hasn't sold like bazillions of copies or anything. I think this is a game everybody should play. Halloween Day, maybe you could be busy or something. So if you can't play on Halloween Day, play in October in general. So let me know some games that you think of when you think of October or Halloween. As I said, Silent Hill, Alien Isolation, like there's Resident Evil. There's plenty of games that I purposely didn't put on this list. We will maybe do a follow-up depending on the success of this video. But let me know games that you think. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.